Last time people complained that the audio wasn't.
Let me raise the sound.
That's a hot place to be.
Okay. Okay.
You want it, Mark? Yes? Okay, wonderful. Okay, Tov, Chodesh Tov. This week's Parsha of Maseh is the final Parsha in the Chumash Bamidbar. And more than that, we could consider it the final Parsha in the Torah. Because next week we begin Chumash Dvarim, Mishnah Torah, which is Moshe, and basically the story of the narrative of the Jewish people in the desert is completed in this week's Parsha. The Torah lists for us 42 places where the Jewish people encamped in the desert. I would hazard to say that few, if any, of those places are known to us. Even Har Sinai is unknown practically. So why does the Torah bother to go to such lengths to tell us about the 42 places that we were? Rashi points out that it's like a travelogue. The father takes his son back to when the boy was a child and they traveled somewhere. And the father says, here we stopped at this hotel, here we saw this site, here you had a headache, here this happened to us. So that's what Moshe is doing here. He's reliving the 40 years in the desert. And he relives it with the Jewish people. So the question arises, since the Torah is eternal, and it speaks to us currently in the same fashion that it spoke when Moshe said these places to the Jewish people in the desert. So what does it teach us? What is the message involved here? And there's a hint to this Because in the Pasuk it says that these are the Masei B'nai Yisrael, the travels of the Jewish people. And then it says, L'chanov Zon Ulamot Zo'on, where they settled and where then they were taken out of to go somewhere else. A few psukim later, the Torah repeats it, but a different order. And there it's Lamot Zo'ayim, to where they're being taken out of and where they settled. So why this discrepancy? So the message here is that one is talking about the past, and one is, so to speak, talking about the future. So in the past, we know where they settled, and therefore we know where they went afterwards. In the future, they would have to leave places, and it wouldn't be quite clear where they would settle, but they would have to move on. So anyone who has any familiarity with the Jewish history will realize that it's a travel. And that even though Jews may have been established and resident in one place for hundreds of years, they never really stayed anywhere. They encamped, but they didn't really permanently settle. So if we review, let's say, the story of the Jewish people. So in the year 70, we're going to mark it now, Tisha B'Av. The Beit HaMikdash is destroyed, and the Jews are taken into exile throughout the Roman Empire. Now, all during the time of the Bayit Sheni, Jews lived in different places already. Even though the main settlement may have been in the land of Israel, there were large settlements in Egypt, especially in the city of Alexandria. Alexandria was to a great extent a Jewish city. Not that it was majority Jewish, but the Jews had a tremendous influence in the city and a tremendous population. So much so that the Jews of Alexandria built a Beit HaMikdash for themselves. It was called Mikdash Chonyo. Chonyo was the name of the original Kohen who wanted to be the Kohen Gadol in Jerusalem. And when he was not appointed, so he did what Jews do, he made his own shul. And he moved to Alexandria. And the Jews of Alexandria, who were wealthy and sophisticated and felt that they were the equal of the Jews of Jerusalem, built a replica of the Beit HaMikdash. According to many, it was even more ornate. And the entire service of the Beit HaMikdash was replicated in Alexandria. Then there was a Jewish settlement in Rome. Mainly, originally of Jewish slaves that were able to obtain their freedom. And a strong Jewish community was built up in Rome, so that when the Romans exiled thousands and tens of thousands of Jews to Rome, there already was a Jewish infrastructure in Rome. The Gemara records for us the power of the Roman Jewish community. Again, the Jews of Rome felt that they were it. So the Gemara says that they sacrificed the Korban Pesach, the Paschal sacrifice, in Rome. They didn't go to Jerusalem, or they couldn't go to Jerusalem. But in Rome, they sacrificed the Korban Pesach. And the Gemara, the Roman community was headed by a Jew called the Todus Horofe. Thaddeus, the physician. So he was a very powerful and well-respected person in Rome. And because the rabbis didn't want to start up with the Roman Jewish community, so they said, we would really put you in the Cherem for what you're doing. We would ban you for what you're doing to bring the Korban Pesach outside Yerushalayim. But you're todas, we are powerless, so we're not going to fight a fight. So you have two centers, Rome and Egypt, Alexandria. Then there's a third center which existed from the Bayis Rishon yet, from the first temple. And those were the Jews that lived in countries that were adjacent to the land of Israel, such as today we give them names: Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Jordan. So those are all fictitious countries drawn on a map by the colonial powers during the First World War. And we see that they all have a difficult time getting their act together because they're not basically a nation. When Jews lived throughout that area, and there was a considerable amount of Jews. There are opinions that even the majority of the Jewish people lived in that area. And especially in what the Gemara calls Bavel, which includes Iraq and Lebanon and northern Syria. And there were great scholars there and great centers of Torah learning and a very, very strong Jewish life. And to a certain extent, they also saw themselves as at least the equal, if not greater, than the Jews that lived in the land of Israel. And the Talmud already records for us the difference of opinion of the rabbis as to whether one should leave Bavel in order to live in Eretz Yisrael, to live in the land of Israel. And there were great rabbis like Rabbi Yehuda, who said that they're not allowed to go back until the Mashiach comes. And that they should stay in Babel. And we see that during the time that Ezra was attempting to rebuild the second temple and restore the second commonwealth, the Jews of Babel didn't come with him. He couldn't even get the Levium to come with him. So you have these different centers of Jewish life who were basically competitors to Jerusalem and to the temple and to the Jewish settlement in the land of Israel. So that was the beginning of our Maseh, of our travel log. We went from the land of Israel to Alexandria, to Rome, to Babylonia, to the Near East. The Jews of Yemen said that they were from the first temple yet. The Roman Empire existed for 500 years. Now, when an empire exists for 500 years, and let's say one is born in the middle of that time, one is convinced that that empire is going to last forever. It lasted 300 years until now. And there's every indication it's going to last for another few hundred years. So that's it. However, history teaches us that no empire and really no country in power ever remains so permanently. In the time that most of us still remember, the British Empire was controlled quarter of the surface of the earth, a third of the world's population. The sun never set on the Union Jack. It was going to be here forever. In our time, all of the European empires collapsed. I've often told you the story about Herzl and the Kaiser. That Herzl met the Kaiser here in 1898 in Mikveh Yisrael, the first agricultural school. And he wanted that the Kaiser Germany should sponsor the establishment of a Jewish homeland. He shopped the idea to all the empires of the world. So he wanted the Kaiser had great ambitions here. That's why we have the German colony here. He brought over thousands of Germans to live here. He reestablished the Templar Knights. The red roofs that are in the land of Israel are a gift of the Kaiser. So Herzl made this proposition to him. And the Kaiser said, Herzl records it in his memoirs, he said, Herr Herzl, in order for a Jewish state to arise in the land of Israel and Palestine, He said all the major empires of the world have to collapse. And he recounted them. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, the German Empire, the Russian Empire, the French Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the English Empire. All of them would have to collapse. And he said, Herr Herzl, you know that is impossible. But within 50 years, his words were prophetic. All the empires of the world collapsed, and the Jewish state came into being. So you have a process here which the Torah predicts. In other words, Maseh is not a story about what happened. It's also a story about what is going to happen. It's not only Lamasehem or Lamotzoehem, it's Lamotzoehem or Lamasehem as well. So in the 4th century, the city of Alexandria was destroyed by pirates. The Jewish community there collapsed. Though later another Jewish community in Fostad in Cairo was established, and it existed till our time, till 1967. The Jewish community in Bovel existed in full strength till about the year 1100. And it was the center of Jewish halacha. The Gaonim in Bovel were the teachers of the Jewish people. And we have the great story that's recounted by many of the rabbinical writings of the time, that there were the yeshivas in Bovel always needed money for a change. So they would send emissaries to the exile to raise money to support the yeshiva. I'm sure that strikes you as an original thought. It's been going on for a long time. So there's the legend of the Arboa Shvuyim. There were 4 rabbis from Bovel that ventured forth. They were going to go to Italy to raise money from the Italian Jewish community. And on the way, the ship was taken by pirates. So pirates usually killed everybody on board. However, when they spotted Jews, they knew that Jews would ransom other Jews for exorbitant funds, enormous amounts of money. Pidyon Shvuyim. So therefore, they took these 4 rabbis captive and they held them for ransom. So one Jewish community in Morocco ransomed one of the rabbis. But they said to him, you have to stay here in Morocco. We need you. Can't go back to Babylonia. And one of the rabbis was ransomed by the Jews of Bari in southern Italy. So he had to stay there. And one was ransomed by Jews in Tuscany. So he had to stay there. So what happened was that this is the spread of Torah. When the Torah scholars arrive and they establish houses of learning, so then a Jewish community begins to form. So the Jews now were in North Africa, Morocco, Algeria. Fez became a major Jewish city. In the 7th century, the Muslims took over in the Middle East completely, and they invaded Spain, came across the Straits of Gibraltar, and they occupied the bottom 2/3 of Spain. The Jews went along with them. So the Jews are in Spain 800 years. So till the end of the 15th century. So again, it seems hard to wrap your mind around it. But if you're in a country 800 years and you're a prominent part of society, you're the bankers, you're the advisors to the king, you're even generals in the army. Some even rose to be what we would consider to be the prime minister. So you're there. It's going to be there. Except again, the Parsha of Masay teaches us that that's not what's going to happen. There were a small group of Babylonian Jews that somehow found themselves in the Rhineland. There was a tri-city there of spires and worms and mites. In Hebrew, they had the Jewish names and Roman names. Well, worms was Vermisa, and mines was Magensa. And spires was Shapiro. These became last names of Ashkenazic Jews, because originally that's where their ancestors came from. He had a very small group of Jews, but they were different because even in Bavel, there were different customs. And now they were isolated from the rest of the Jewish world. And they were the ones that developed Ashkenazic Jewry. And the great Rabbi Gershom or Agola, who lived in Mainz. So he had disciples, and his disciples established the basic structure of Ashkenazic Jewry. Those disciples in turn had disciples. The third generation was that of Rashi. Rashi studied in Mainz. At the time of Rashi, there were only about 5,000 Ashkenazic Jews in the world. And they lived in the Rhineland, and they lived in Provence, and they lived in Spain, France, central, around Paris and Troyes. From those 5,000 Jews, there developed the millions of Jews of Ashkenaz. But most of the Jews were in Spain and in the Middle East. The Jews will be expelled from France. The Jews will be expelled from England. So they pushed eastward. They settled in Germany. There were great pogroms in Germany in the 12th and 13th centuries. So the Jews pushed further eastward and came to Poland, came to Central Europe, to Austria and Bohemia, pushing all the time. The Jews are going to be in Poland 800 years. They'll be in Central Europe 800 years. So again, this is the story of the Jewish people. It's Lamassehem, Lamotzohem. For some reason, in the 19th century, the Jews of Eastern Europe decided that they're going to leave. Sizable proportion went to North America. Then Jews went to South America, they went to South Africa. A small number went back to the land of Israel. So if you look at the entire picture, we are always traveling. We're always going somewhere, always leaving somewhere.